Monica, and I am your Dallas County Democratic Party Chair. We are so glad to have this particular town hall. We had many requests because with what's going on in the nation, we all wanted to know more about building racial relationships. And we have a great panel. But I will introduce our moderator, who will later introduce you to the panelists. We want you to know that Judge Audrey Morehead is the first woman ever elected to serve in the criminal court number 3, where she serves right now. But that's not her only first. She has been the first African-American woman who has served in various capacities for some of the bar organizations. And she doesn't just stop with the local bar. She goes on and she hits the Texas bar and the national bar. I promised her I would keep this short. I'll just tell you some of the highlights that I think are so wonderful about her. In addition to her big smile, which is contagious, she started out as a professional nonprofit executive working for the Visiting Nurse Association. She practiced on her own for 14 years in the practice of law in various areas, including criminal law. But I tell you what really impressed me is when we invited her to Dallas Democratic Party float for an MLK parade, and I think she knew every single person that was lined up along the way, and they were yelling her name. So, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the moderator who knows everybody in Dallas County, Judge Audrey Morehead.
Oh, Carol, thank you. You are so kind. You are too kind. I appreciate that introduction. And if that's your way of saying I'm way too popular, I'm sure there are many that would agree. But I am just really excited to be here. And I want to just say thank you, Carol, for your leadership during this period of time. We all know what a challenge it's been, but Carol Donovan is your Democratic Party chair. And she is working hard, and I appreciate that we have this opportunity and ability to have this conversation, what we call a community conversation, building race relations. Our dialogue tonight is going to be centered on addressing police brutality and reform of the criminal justice system, and how we, that's us, we can make the changes that we are seeking. We have an impressive group of panelists that has a long history of working in this community. And I'm going to introduce each of them, and then I am going to ask the first question, but I want to make sure we've got everybody introduced first. The first person that I'd like to introduce is Mr. Changa Higgins.
You got it.
Yes, who is it?
I have Changa Higgins, and I have that Changa is a leader for Dallas Community Police Oversight Coalition. He's an organizer with a focus on police reform, community development, and racial justice. He spearheaded the creation and implementation of the Dallas Office of Police Oversight. So it's going to be very important to hear from Changa Higgins tonight. We also have Devontae Peters. Devontae Peters is a community activist and organizer from Oak Cliff, Texas. That's my hood. And he is very, very well known in historic Highland Hills. And he specializes in community engagement, and this activism has gone on for many, many years. We also have John Fullenwinder. John Fullenwinder goes way, way back to my Dallas Urban League days. And he is an activist and co-founder of Mothers Against Police Brutality. He's a community organizer with over 35 years of experience. He's testified before the Texas legislature and in Congress on issues including housing and home insecurity. We are absolutely honored to have tonight Eddie Bernice Johnson, our United States representative representing the 30th District of Texas. She has served an absolutely amazing 14 terms. She was elected as the first African American and first female ranking member of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. And last I heard, I think I heard you say that you were weary, but you weren't giving up. I can definitely understand that because you have been working, you have labored in the vineyard a very long time. And you have seen, Congresswoman, you've seen years of legislation and watched legislation pass. You watch it fail. And I want to start with this current news. What can we expect in the Justice in Policing Act? And how did we get it done? Or are we gonna get it done?
Well, I hope that we will get it done. We had our first hearings today on the new bill. I have very good confidence that we will get it done in the House. It might be a few amendments. I don't expect too many in the House. I expect much more discussion in the Senate. I am very aware that Senator Scott from South Carolina is also putting in a bill. I have not seen the provisions of his bill yet in the Senate. Senator Scott is an African-American senator from South Carolina who is Republican. And I don't know who his confidants have been in putting his together. But what we have put together is a combination of what we've been trying to pass a number of years. Some of the things we have been trying to pass as long as I've been in Congress. So we're trying to take advantage of this very troubling time to see if we can make some progress. I was somewhat impressed with the hearing today because I was looking especially and listening to the Republican members of the Judiciary Committee to see what their attitudes were. Because as you know, we have a majority in the House, but it does not get us very far if we totally ignore them because they have a majority in the Senate. And it takes both the House and the Senate to pass the bill and the president to sign it before it becomes law. And so it's been interesting, but all of the various issues of which, am I still on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All of the various issues that we have been working on over the years have been addressed in this bill. We do not have a measure in that to do away with any police department, as we feel that is probably unwise if we're understanding that on the face of the subject. But it addresses a number of issues we have wanted over the years for peace officers to address. So I'll try to be available for any questions we might have. I might say that while I'm doing in my opening remarks, is that I am not anti-police, but I am anti many of the practices we've had to suffer, and we're trying to address that in the legislation. I have worked since the 70s on this issue. And on some issues, we've had some results that last a while, and other ones we've not. Now, we're stressing community policing. In the 80s, when I was in the Senate, we had community policing here in Dallas after we had 2 seniors to be killed over in South Dallas. It worked, but the funding went out. And Mr. Fullenweiler can tell you, because I've worked right along with him many times on these various issues. You can start something, and if it's working, you look up and it's stopped. And so we have to be very vigilant in making sure that the issues that we are interested in, that we know work, must continue to be supported. So I will be available for any questions. I am willing to learn and willing to try to explain where we are. I think that in terms of my working along these areas, it's been pretty much of an open book since the 70s.
But that's true. Your work has been legendary, and I would be interested to know from Mr. Higgins, because I want to kind of relate what's going on in the Dallas with the Oversight Committee, what they're doing that complements or connects with in any way the Justice in Policing Act. Mr. Higgins, I think they had a meeting last night. Is that correct?
Well, the Dallas Community Police Oversight Board did have a meeting last night, yes.
Do you have, and I understand that was a marathon session of almost 5 hours. Is that true?
It was a 5 hour, it was long, it was a 5 hour session.
So do you have an update on what occurred at that meeting and if anything, in any of the discussion related to some of the things that we're talking about in the Justice in Policing Act, like banning chokeholds, no-knock warrants, the police department collecting and sending use of force data, creating grant programs to investigate, to have an independent process to investigate misconduct and excessive use, and training programs on racial bias.
Yeah, so a quick update on the board. Last night was a really big meeting. It was the first time the board met in 2 months since the COVID crisis. And first of all, let me just say hello to Congresswoman Johnson. I served on a task force that was headed up by Ms. Colette Flanagan from Mothers Against Police Brutality, and John Fullenweiner, who's on this panel. You know, just want to say thank you for having that. It really opened up the doors for us to be able to create a framework to get the board and the Office of Police Oversight implemented. So just wanted to acknowledge you and appreciate you for convening that a few years ago. Yeah, so back to the board, you know, it was a great meeting. Some things that came out of it was that the board voted unanimously to actually do a full review and audit of Dallas's use of force policy. It also last night voted to do a full review into Dallas's protest policy. They also requested from DPD data around low-level arrests, around the protests that happened over the last 9 days, as well as low-level arrests during the COVID-19 crisis. So since the last 2 or 3 months that we've been under shelter-in-place orders, wanting to get real data, because that data is kind of hard to understand what people are being arrested for in open data. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really big meeting. They covered a lot. They also questioned Chief Hall about her actions, and I think they're going to call her in to answer some questions on the next board meeting too. So there is work in progress happening with the Dallas Community Police Oversight Board. I would say that oversight boards are not the end-all be-all solution to stopping us from being killed, being over-policed, and this militarized, increasingly militarized presence in our communities. But it is a means to an end. It can open the door for more transparency. It can open the door for more community control. It can open the door to changing the conversation, which I think a lot of oversight boards have done across the country, to give citizens a better look behind the blue wall of police departments, which I think that has helped to change the conversation nationally to now where we're talking about defunding and eventual abolishment of police departments. So I think that they're kind of only as good as we make them. And here in Dallas, the challenge here is to get the city of Dallas, the city manager's office, and the and other decision makers within the city to realize what oversight is. Unfortunately, we're in a city where none of our elected officials really took the time or had any value until the city was burning to understand what 21st century policing was, to understand what real oversight of police would be. And so we have a situation now to where our city is in such a tense moment that they're all trying to understand, because now there's a value to do something about it. So
let me ask you this question. I hate to interrupt, but I got to do it because I need to. Because I think other people, because I want to know, what is the real role and responsibility of the Oversight Committee? What should we in the community of Dallas expect from the Oversight Committee?
So what you should expect from the oversight, so there's two components I got to mention. There's the Oversight Board, which is the city council appointed representatives. There's 15 of them, which used to be the old Community Police Review Board, or Civilian Review Board. And then there's the Office of Police Oversight, which is an independent investigatory agency that reports to the board. The way so there's two components. The board actually has the power and authority to call for investigations of critical incidents or any incidents that they feel like is related to the public trust or the relationship between the police and the community. So the Office of Police Oversight does have the power to investigate critical incidents, which critical incidents are like shootings and anywhere force is used to cause bodily harm by police officers. They have the power to launch their own investigations, to have access to the same evidence that the police department does. They have the ability to be present at any evidence briefings or anything that the police department does. And when an officer who's involved in a shooting, like say for instance, an officer involved shooting, when they have to give their testimony or their interview, the director of the Office of Police Oversight can be present to be a part of that interview and ask questions if needed to the facilitator, and they can ask those questions. So I mean, it's really big. I think also the Office of Police Oversight, Community Police Oversight, is also the first intake. Now intakes complaints, whereas before complaints would be you could only go to the Dallas Police Department to file a complaint to the headquarters, and there wasn't a formalized form. There was no way to do it online. You can now do them online, and you can also go to, I think they're still working on all this, but we're supposed to be able to go to other police stations as well as libraries, and I think expand to rec centers to be able to fill out a complaint form, and it would be routed to the Office of Community Police Oversight, where a complaint specialist will intake your form and contact you, and then move you through the process from there. So all of this stuff is still being worked out because there's technology behind it. There's different operations or whatever that has to be set up because the office is still fairly new. They just hired the director in October. So so the director has been kind of tasked with implementing all that stuff. So, but you know, as far as the citizens in the community, they're only going to be as strong as we make it, because like I said, there are elements within the city that don't really understand what oversight is, that are good enough with just getting what we have now passed when this was a phase one. Like this was always supposed to be the initial step. So the next step is for us as community accountability partners, oversight practitioners, organizers, and organizations to continue to put that pressure on them and expand the power to where it should actually be, where it's fully independent.
Thank you so much for that. And you mentioned in your remarks about collecting data regarding low-level arrests minor crimes, misdemeanors, and that's sometimes called a broken window policing. And I wanted to see if I could ask Mr. Peters, um, because I know that Oak Cliff and Highland Hills especially has considered itself to having been over policed in the past. Do you have any concerns about whether if the oversight committee is addressing the issues that are important to you and in your community, and do you have any opinion about over policing or broken window policing in the Oak Cliff Highland Hills area?
Um, well, I would love to see the oversight board to support this community. I don't as far as my experience in Highland Hills, I don't really see there is a over policing. What I see is, the unfortunately, the people have to depend on the police over there. But when they don't come out until somebody is pretty much, like on the floor, like, killed or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And then in this area, it's actually a police station less than 0.9 miles away. So when the elders or, when the senior citizens in the area, they call the police, because they're shooting and things of that nature. That unfortunately they will not come out unless somebody is dead on the floor. So that was some of the the climate that actually inspired me to do the work that I did in Highland Hills, as far as the community engagement specialist program, where we actually came into the neighborhood and not necessarily police, but we supported the the residents of this community in terms of safety and security, being an extra resource, that they could call, that will respond way sooner than the police, and we wouldn't just come out, just because somebody, was dead or anything. But, beyond that, we also fed the community, and that's kind of what I think, needs to go on is not necessarily policing per se, because policing, in my opinion, it's actually, it seems like you're kind of treating the symptoms or, uh, 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 excuse me, uh, I I apologize. Yeah. So, So it feels like with policing, you're kind of treating the symptoms opposed to the actual problem. You know what I'm saying? And I think the problem, with especially like communities like Highland Hills or Oak Cliff, it's economic disparity, for generations of economic disparity, and so now we're kind of reduced to crimes to feed ourselves, to catch up and try to live a life different than what we're living, because in Bonneview and Simpson Stewart, there's no place for you to go to apply for a job. There's no place for you to go, other than maybe the post office and the Family Dollar over there. The Family Dollar over there. That's the only place that you can really apply to. So I think people in this neighborhood, they need meaningful work. I feel like, a lot of these youth and these kids, that's really who's doing a lot of the crime over there. It is the youth, because a lot of them are homeless, and it's a cry for help. But I do feel like if they had activities over there, if they had a vocational center where they can get skills and they could advance themselves, I think a lot of the criminal activity part would die out. And and I understand, like, there's a conversation about defunding and potentially dismantling the police. I just feel like, with public safety and law enforcement getting over, getting 60% of the budget, Dallas, I feel like at least, even with 1 or 2% or 3% of that, 3 or 2 plus $2 billion that they get, I feel like it could be, redirected to activities for kids in Highland Hills to advance themselves and express themselves. But yeah, so that's my take on it. And I don't know what broken window policing means, but yeah, that's my take on the situation. I feel like, especially in the Black communities, we don't have it is very hard for us. It's not convenient for us to advance ourselves. We have to get a meaningful job. We have to drive all the way to Capel. We have to drive all the way to Irving. We have to drive all the way to, wherever. That's not in our community. And so and a lot of us, we don't have transportation and things of that nature. So I feel like, and I've seen in my own experience that a lot of people they don't just go in committing crimes. They try to advance themselves. They try to get jobs and fill out applications and get opportunities, but over time, what I'm saying, we continue to get rejected in a lot of instances, and that's when we revert to other activities to advance ourselves. So I think that's just my take on the situation.
I appreciate that too, because then you mentioned economic disparity, and I believe poverty is the great equalizer. But we also have another, I think, something that has equalized this discussion, and that is the cries of mothers of sons who have been killed or injured at the hands of police. And I want to pull in Mr. Fullerwander to talk a little bit about this work that Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson is doing, and the work that the Oversight Committee is doing, and the work that Mr. Peters is doing in the southern sector of Dallas. How can mothers against police brutality use their platform to move this message farther?
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate all the remarks that have been made so far. Let me put it this way. The nation is riveted on the issue of police brutality because of a widely spread, widely shared, obviously cruel murder of Mr. Floyd on May 25th.
Great.
And that killing illustrates, and the reaction to it illustrates a useful way to think about police brutality. And that is that it's a crisis that played out in Minneapolis or here in Dallas or in any rural area or town. And so it seems like a local crisis. But the protesters are telling us, and also the data tells us, that this is a national crisis. I mean, there are 1,000 people a year killed by the police in America. And it's been that way since we had a good count. It was the year after Mike Brown was killed, when people were in the streets, that the questions was asked, how many people get killed every year by the police? And the FBI director at the time said he didn't know. He said he thought it was a disgrace that we didn't know. And they had a few ways of counting, but when the Post, Washington Post, and the Guardian newspaper in England started tracking them using media sources and other sources, they found that about 1,000 people a year are killed by the police through gunfire. And that, depending on what year it is, this shows you how big this is. The number of people killed by gun homicides in the country, over the past 5 years probably goes from around 11,000 to up to 15,000 in a high year. So you can see that a significant portion of gun deaths in the country are police. Police are the perpetrators. And then you have a situation where there's no, so anything that causes the death of 1,000 people, it might not seem like so much in the pandemic, but it is quite big. And anytime 1,000 Americans die, that is a national crisis. But it's a national crisis in another way as well. And that is that it's none of the people that get killed by the convicted of anything. They've never gone to trial, And so you have a taking of your human right to live without any trial or due process. Mm-hmm. And then you have, and then somehow you're supposed to get your human rights protected by the city council in your town. Now, everybody listening knows that a human rights in this country is protected by the Constitution of the United States. They're not protected by the Dallas City Charter or Baton Rouge Police Department. So we have a human rights violation of a major scale. And we have And then the third way it's a national crisis is that there's no national standard for when a police officer can kill you. There's a standard that grew out of the Garner case in 1985, I think, and it was if the police officer feared for his life or feared for the life of a bystander, then they could use deadly force. And that's been a get out of jail free card ever since they said it. Because of those 1,000 deaths per year, there's only about 7 or 8 prosecutions. And of that, fewer are convicted. So you could say that in America, a police officer can do anything to you, even kill you. And 993 times out of 1,000, not one thing will happen. Now, the city of Dallas has a very bad record when it comes to deadly force. I'll just mention one thing to let you know how bad it is. We've had exactly 2 city of Dallas officers convicted in a fatal shooting over the past half century. We had Officer Darrell Kane was convicted for killing Santos Rodriguez in 1973, and Officer Amber Geiger was convicted for killing Botham Jean in 2018. She was convicted a year later. So you have a half century of killings. And some of the people on this panel and some of your older listeners will know that hundreds of people have been killed during that time. The reason we got our first review board was a 70-year-old grandmother named Etta Collins was killed in 1985 on her own front porch. Blood all over her cane and her clothes. And the cops who killed her said she had walked out of the house and made a rushing movement toward them. And it turned out that she couldn't walk without a cane. She could barely move. And there was no charges against those officers. No indictment, no trial, no conviction. And in every other case between 1973 and 2018, no city of Dallas police officer was convicted in a fatal shooting.
Well, Mr. Pullenweiser, I want to talk about that because we know the problem is systemic. We know this is a issue that has been going on for literally 401 years. But right. You made the comment, and I think it's very important that this is a human rights violation and that these are constitutional rights that are being violated. And at the very top of this chain is where we have Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, where he's going to have to look at this issue in terms of human rights violations and see how Congress is going to address the many layers of systemic racism in this country. Congresswoman Johnson, can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, let me say that it is a continual battle, but I think that the way we get new energy is when something happens. And that's why I think we need to use what has just happened and the reaction of the public to get done as much as we can. I was listening to the young man out talking about Highland Hills. I've been working with the community college out there trying to get so many young people in for different training. I understand that this is an area where skills are needed. And I have been working very hard to expand that area. Ever since I have been in Congress, I've had an anti-crime program in that quadrant of my district to try to give young people direction and ways in which they can avoid some difficulties. But you know, it is continual. And we can use these opportunities to try to push a little further. But I can tell you that as soon as we get past a crisis, the attention of the public seems to kind of wane. I can say that we spent 3 months fighting for to save food stamps all up until Christmas. I never really heard from anyone here, but I had enough understanding of our needs here to know that we needed food stamps. This particular president had decided he'd pass out sack lunches at unemployment offices. And most of the kids that are really hungry are not going to employment offices. So I think we need to keep our eye on the issues all the way. And until we get sensitive people that are sensitive to needs, understand those needs, and willing to address those needs in place, we'll be battling this for a long time to come. But I do think that this incident, just like the last one we had here in Dallas when the four policemen were killed, we use that opportunity to try to influence more sensitivity and more understanding then. We cannot allow this to pass without addressing all of our needs. We realize that lots of times it's a misunderstanding. It's the frustration of not having transportation, not having opportunity, not knowing who the police are. And that's why community policing is so positive. And so it entails a number of issues that have to be addressed locally. I've talked with the city manager who came here and didn't know the city. Most of the people with any kind of historical knowledge of what was going on was relieved of jobs, and so we had to start all over. The people that came in hardly knew where South Dallas was. And so we had to start again to try to educate on housing, and I've met with him and many of the nonprofit housing developers. It is a total picture of the total person and the understanding that these are peace officers that we are depending on. They are not in war with us. And we need to make sure that we have an attitude among our peace officers that they're here to help. When you have a friendly policeman that is familiar with that community, you don't have these incidences. It doesn't relieve us of poverty, but it does relieve us of the fear of police.
Well, let me ask you before we go back over here to Mr. Higgins. I wanted to ask, because this problem that we're having with police brutality, and we're talking about systemic racism, and that is such a complex issue. How do we really begin to reform, have criminal justice reform, if we don't find a way to address educational disparities, healthcare disparities, and economic disparities? Is there an overall plan coming out of Congress built on this foundation, this motivation that we have now, to begin to address those issues?
We didn't start with this incident to address those issues. We've been trying to address those issues for the last 25 years that I've been there, and long before I got there. And so it didn't start with just this incident. Poverty didn't start with this incident. The lack of skills, the changing to intellectual property and intellectual technology jobs that are eliminating a lot of jobs, that didn't start with this incident. That's been going on a while. We've been trying to address it a while, but it all starts and how we get it done at the ballot box. It depends on whether you have people you can work with to help you get things done. There are 435 people in the House of Representatives and 100 in the Senate. You need 218 votes for any simple thing you're trying to pass, and sometimes you need 260 or 70. And so it depends on who is trying to work with you to address these issues. We've had the worst president in office in the history of this country this last 3.5 years, and he has stimulated more of this division. And so that has to be looked at as well. It's hardly anything we can isolate and determine it's one issue. It is a total number of issues if we look at the total families and what is going on. Racism has been with us ever since this country has been established, and we've tried to work on that. But if you don't have your leadership sensitive to fairness, then the people who are inclined to be racist feel very free to be very racist, and that's where we are in this society.
Absolutely, we do have this climate, and I appreciate you saying that. I want to ask Mr. Higgins, because Mr. Higgins, you have a reputation of being an activist and an organizer. And so what types of strategies do you see that we can use here at the local level to engage our community, keep them engaged and impassioned, and get them out to use their voice to vote and make a difference?
Well, I think that kind of starts with I personally feel that um, I'm of the mindset that people in my community who don't vote because they don't feel a connection to the issues or they don't feel a connection to the system, right? There's a lot of talk about, that it's very critical of people who don't vote and who aren't engaged in the political system. And we know that, around 13 to 10%, anywhere from 10 to 13% actually vote in the local elections around here. But I think that the onus and the power of, actually, I challenge the local Dallas Democratic Party to address issues, right? I think that if they were engaging the community more, having discussions like what we're having now and actually getting out in the community and helping people connect the dots on how voting connects to changing things in their everyday life, really tangible things, then people would be more involved. So a lot of people blame the voters and they put the responsibility on the voters, but I personally feel like the Dallas Democratic Party and other organizations that understand the importance of the vote haven't did a good enough job to explain to everyday people who are disengaged, who are disenfranchised, and feel no connection to the political or electoral or anything that's going on outside of putting food on their families' tables and surviving.
Okay, well,
They just haven't made the issues relevant to those people.
I want to build on that, and I want to ask Mr. Peters. Mr. Peters, are you there? I see you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
He made a statement that the party should be doing more in the community to connect with people. What would an activity that the party could do, for instance, in your neighborhood, in your community, that you think that people would respond to and resonate with who are not already somewhat engaged in the process?
Well, first off, I think that's a great question. I think, and secondly, I think what Changa said is definitely on point. That it needs to be something that's relevant to people's everyday life. So it's various things that the party could potentially do, but just making sure that the party has somebody that's on the ground that's connected with the issues. The issues of the people. Where they need to be, where changes made, or excuse me, where changes needed to be made. So, if the party doesn't really understand the issues, then it's going to be hard for them to connect with these various communities. So I could say different things like, give out diapers and Pampers, or food for kids, you know what I'm saying, or Similac or something, or help pay off. I don't know, I think it's various things that can be done, but what really I would challenge the party to do as well is to get somebody on the ground in areas like Highland Hills, South Dallas, Oak Cliff, or support the people that are on the ground, so you can get a better understanding of these these communities. You know what I'm saying? Because it's ultimately going to go down to the ground game. Like, we got to get these parties and the politicians and the people that's in that arena to pretty much really just be able to connect with the issues and understand them, even if they don't necessarily live in those kind of communities. At least you have somebody who does, who can help you, with different programs that meet the needs to those specific communities.
Well, Devontae, you
Let me comment on that.
Oh, yes, Congresswoman.
I hear what you're saying. I think there probably is a disconnect on what is possible. The party is no more than the people. When people are elected to office, they have a responsibility. I'm not going to make an excuse because I use every breathing hour that I have working on these issues. I spend most of the week in Washington, come on weekends and run to everything people want me to go to and get back to work. And you try to pass various measures to do it. Now, let me just say that I also support the North Texas Food Bank and all of the various groups that ask for money to the degree of which I can. We try to put things in place to make sure that people have access to it. I'm not sure that you'll be able to depend on a particular party to do that. I think that there are neighborhood groups, there are PTAs, if parents participate in the Parent-Teacher Association so that they could get an understanding from those meetings. Churches have a lot of outreach. When people know what the needs are, they try to rise to the occasion. I'm not sure that we will ever have a local, county, or state or federal government that's going to furnish every family every need that they have. I wish we had that, but we don't. The Constitution really permits us the freedom to make sure we can provide for ourselves, and then there are funds that help where it's needed. But I'm not going to sit and tell you, unless you can tell me how I can do this, how I can get every family diapers, how I can get every family whatever they might need, because that's a family responsibility. I will try to support every program that gives them the help, but it's expected that we look out for ourselves when it comes to that. I have tried to do everything to increase training, to increase opportunity, but I've got to know a little bit more about what else is it we can do. We're never going to be able to pass out food at every door. We're never going to be able to pass out diapers at every household. When they go to the hospitals, we provide for various packages for them to take home. We've got all kind of outreach areas going on, but I am not in a position to know what every single household needs. And if I did know, I couldn't take it to every single door. So that's where you can help me as to what other umbrella type programs we need. Do we need just opportunity so they can get a job and take care of themselves? Tell me exactly what we do next, because every single program that is going on now, you've got volunteer people, agencies that got something to help. Is it a disconnect where you get it, or what is it?
First, I just want to say thank you, Congresswoman, for even, acknowledging and listening to me, because, a lot of time, the youth and younger people aren't listened to, and I appreciate you working with us and trying to, find solutions to our needs. Pretty much I would love to, help you or, figure stuff out and work with you to figure it out where the disconnect is. And I kind of do feel like, the disconnect a lot of the times is just the atmosphere and the aura that, these state or these city programs that they have, just the energy, and going up to there and the lack of, and I know it's not the state's job per se, but, just transportation a lot of times, kills people's motivation. But, that's not the same for every community. Every community doesn't need diapers, but I would be willing to work with you to figure out, the various issues that different communities need and what we could do, and I do believe, I'm a strong believer in it's not money that, that all these people need. Sometimes it's we can get creative and do other things. So, but I do appreciate you, everything that you're doing out here.
One of the questions that I'm asking you the questions that I'm getting from the community, and one of the questions that I've gotten is, we now have engaged or awakened some of our white allies, or people have become allies that are non-African American. And one of the questions is how do we continue to build that relationship? And if we should we be investing and encouraging relationships with white allies to help advance the issues that we're facing within the African American community? Mr. Higgins, do you have an opinion about that? I was going to ask Mr. Quillen.
I sure do. I would say this, that in the past 2 years, when you're talking about allies, the Dallas Community Police Oversight Coalition, what was unique about it is that there were organizations and people in that coalition from all across the city that actually pushed for oversight. They were white, black, brown. Some of those people I had never thought I would believe that I would work on an issue like police oversight with. And so I think it's definitely important that we're in a moment now where people are ready, they're engaged. The consciousness about policing and what's possible has shifted in this country, not just for Black people, for whites, for other people who have been sitting around watching this, and they're trying to envision a new future and a new reality for policing, or if it even needs to be police departments anymore. And I think that's that we need to continue to build those relationships. And I will say that, you know, that was a big part of how we were able to get oversight, because it wasn't just Black and brown people from the southern sector going down there, putting pressure on the elected officials down at City Hall. We had white folks. You know, we had folks from the suburbs and from churches, you know, well-known churches in North Dallas that said, you know what, I'll throw my name in, you know, and my name means something to these people down here. I'll throw my name in, and we're willing to step out there and speak on it and say that now is the time. So you got to build movements that's just more than us. You got to have people from all walks of life and allies, and so I feel like you need to do that. I would like to just mention really quickly to just come behind Devontae on the programs things. We want to see the Dallas Democratic Party, right? Like we don't hear you speak out on our issues. Like I've been working on policing for over 10 years now, like police brutality, police violence, murders cases for 10 years. I've never heard of the Dallas Democratic Party ever putting out a statement saying it's unacceptable, even to acknowledge the pain. I have never seen, and I'm not saying I've watched and paid attention all these years, but I've never seen the local Dallas Democratic Party come out and have a stance or a program or agenda on the critical issues that are affecting their most loyal and biggest base in this city, and that's African Americans. And I think that if you want people to be engaged, you first of all, you identify the people on the ground that are pushing for change. Also, figure out how you can actually facilitate conversations and how you can stand up and be a part of collectively. I'm saying the Dallas Democratic Party taking a stance on these issues. In this city right now, there are elected officials on the city level who have been silent. With George Floyd, the city protesting for the last 9 days, 10 days, they have been silent about the issues of policing. Dallas Democratic Party should be having to convene something to talk about how Black elected officials, if they don't know how they can articulate and be a part of these movements and help support movements like In Defense for Black Lives, Mothers Against Police Brutality, the Coalition, and other people who have real tangible agendas and things that are happening right now, that your voice and your authority, your name and your voice, and to say that we represent this many voters can have an impact in making some of this stuff a reality. That's how you engage. That's how you become relevant. That's how you get people to the polls.
And you
I
are
really
absolutely
appreciate
right.
that. I really appreciate that very much. I think that everyone you're talking with is a Democratic Party here. And I guess what I'm listening to you trying to understand is that you want a single voice to say I represent the Democratic Party, because everybody here on this call pretty much that have been doing anything represent the Democratic Party. We are Democrats. We are sponsoring this tonight. And I hope you're one, because
I am.
if not, oh, good, okay.
I am for now.
Oh, okay,
Hey,
all right.
hey.
But we are the voice. We are the voices. So let the people know that when we stand up and speak, we represent the Democratic Party.
Well, what I'm saying, Congresswoman Johnson, I understand that. I think it works two ways. I think that the Democratic Party as a party collectively here needs to determine and figure out what their stance is going to be and communicate that to the community and take a stand out there, not individually, but as a party, to say we for your loyalty, for your vote, for all of the things that you've done, we represent you and we stand with you, and we will support movements out here that are real movements that are dealing with critical issues that are important in our community. So
I think what you're saying is that we need to stay in touch. We need to stay in touch with each other on these issues.
We need action right now. We need visible symbols and action of support. from our local Dallas Democratic Party.
But when you say action, I'm giving you this because we're getting close, and I don't want to keep people on. I know they have other things to do. Everybody's time is valuable, and we are so appreciate you being here. But I want to let you all know that there is going to, apparently Trump is coming to town for some strange reason. Why
To
he's
get
coming.
money tomorrow.
He coming. I don't know why he won't come. You know he don't need to come to no Dallas. But okay, if for action, we are. There will be a protest tomorrow at 5 p.m. and they are meeting at the intersection of Royal Lane and Straight Lane. That's Strait at 5 p.m. So you see that this is a peaceful protest. And by peaceful, I mean maybe you can work your neck, shake your finger, but it is a peaceful protest. But we would love to have everyone out in large numbers tomorrow at 5 p.m. We have
Let me say before we go, I will not be able to do that because I have a committee meeting going on at that time.
We know you're there in spirit. You've been protesting. You've been protesting since he won the election.
But I will be a part of a press conference before then, but I won't be able to attend that rally.
Well,
I encourage everyone who can.
We're getting ready to close out, and I want to ask John Fullenwinder, and then I need to have you close us out, Congresswoman. But John Fullenwinder has been a ally, white or not, or otherwise, since back before Roosevelt Johnson was running the Urban League. And that's a long time, Congresswoman Johnson.
Yeah.
He's been an ally a long time. Would you give us...
he's white.
I know. Me too, until they said something about white allies. I was like, oh, that's John. But I want to ask you, John, would you give us 2 minutes of if you have a point that you really want to leave us with. I want to give you 2 minutes, and we're going to move on and let our panelists close us out.
Okay, I want to say that the moment that we're in is very positive. It's national and it's local. It's national, and you have the Justice and Policing Act there. It's local, where the police stuff, you regulate it through the DA's office, through what Changa and they were doing on the review board and so forth. But the other aspect of this is what are we going to do? We're going to try to regulate these killer cops. Okay, I'll just say it that way. But the other thing people are asking for is a new vision of public safety. And that's where this defund the police initiative comes from. The idea is that public safety is not being over-policed, racially profiled, and brutalized. That's not making the community safe, and it's making the city less just every day. If we start thinking of public safety as community well-being, then we look at and we see that $600 million goes to the police department and 18 million goes to homeless programs, all right? So one thing we can do locally is not take $600 million, 60% of the budget almost, and give it to the police department and use funds that don't need to be used in policing and in the existing unjust way of having public safety, and put them into housing initiatives and employment initiatives and things that the people themselves know make them feel more safe and secure in their homes. So it's two things. It's regulate the unjust policing in the society and defund it to the extent that we can fund humane programs on the scale that they're needed. Because everything that Congresswoman said is being done has not kept the city of Dallas from having the highest child poverty rate in this country.
That's right.
And even if it wasn't the highest, it's still too high. So we've got to look at the community well-being as being our goal, not just getting more police on the beat. So we don't need the state troopers to come in and hassle people in Oak Cliff like they did in South Dallas last summer. What we need to do is look at what are the human needs in that community that make people feel safer, more stable, and able to live and have a good life. And that's not more policing. And it doesn't mean that when you're being robbed, you can't call 911 and find a police officer. But it might mean that when you're uncle is having a mental health crisis, that you don't get 2 armed policemen to show up and shoot him. You get a proper mental health counseling team to show up and help him. That's what we're talking about. And when you put the prosperity of the community and well-being first, then the people that are totally disengaged, like Devontae's talking about, that don't relate to the Democrats or anybody, they'll start to see it's in their interest to get behind this movement. And that's how we'll keep people engaged.
Absolutely. And before we go to Mr. Tachunga, I want to thank our sponsors who've been so generous to help support the party and this event. We want to thank the Tillotson Law Firm and the Honorable Carol Donovan and Dan Donovan. Our meeting sponsors are the Honorable Terry Barker and Dr. Catalina E. Garcia and Hamilton Wingo LLP. We thank our friendship sponsors, the Honorable Marcy Helfin and Robert Book and Scott Perez LLP. We could not do any of what we do without their consistent and generous support. So thank you to them. Chunga, will you give us some closing remarks, some thoughts about where we go from here, next steps?
Really, I think I've said enough. Like, I think we can. I think we definitely need to be supporting the push to make that oversight board as strong as possible here in Dallas. I think we need to definitely support organizations that are pushing this defund movement right now. They just got a big win yesterday for 10 city council folks voting and voting to reallocate funds from DPD to social programs. And I think we need to keep the pressure on that for all that we've been talking about here. And remember that, you know, oversight is just a mean to an end. It's not our final thing, but that we need to support all these movements. And then, you know, Democratic Party here locally, we just need to keep talking, right? And we need to figure out some ways that we can get on the ground and like break through to some people who are in the grassroots down there actually working and figuring out how to connect people to the Democratic Party and make the connection to break the disconnect, right? So I just thank y'all for having me and having this discussion. I hope y'all have some more. And, you know, I want to hear from some of the other folks.
Mr. Peters, over there in Oak Cliff, that's my hood.
Yeah, put it in. Hey, look. So I'm gonna say, I everything, you know, Chonga said, John Fullerwire said, you know, is definitely, you know, alignment with my way of thinking. I just feel, you know, like what we're doing needs to connect directly to the issues, to the needs. You know, connect with the people that's on the ground. But I do also, Congresswoman said that pretty much you need to take what's going on and utilize that energy to get things done. And I think this is the perfect time. There's a lot of energy out there right now. People are increasingly wanting to get involved, and they just need to be directed. So I see, you know, they're asking, they just want to get involved. And I do feel like if the Dallas Democratic Party, like Chonga said, had a stronger presence here, you know, just in the community, then, you know, the Democratic Party could benefit from a lot of that energy that's out there. But yeah, so hey, I'm with it. I do feel like we need to redirect some of that money from the police and put it into the programs that are relevant. But, you know, that's my personal perspective. And once again, I appreciate y'all putting this together, for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. Because like I said, a lot of times the youth, our voices, we're not heard. And but I think, you know, it's going to take all the generations to work through this together and figure it out. So thanks again.
Thank you. And we have been so blessed to have Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson to sacrifice and serve our community for these many years. And she's one of the most powerful women in the world. And it makes me so proud to know that she is there, and it gives me such confidence and that she is there to speak up for us. She has the history of what's going on, and then she can speak to what needs to happen in the future. And as powerful as she is accessible. As she said, she's got a meeting here and a meeting there. She's very hard to pin her down. I had to actually put my office in her building just to make sure I could get to her when I wanted to. Didn't I do it? I did.
That's right.
I did. But you can reach her by contacting DeMarcus Alford, her district outreach coordinator, and his phone number. I'm gonna give it to you. He's gonna be mad, but I'm gonna give it to you. It's 214-922-8885. If anybody wants to type that in, because I'm reading it, it's 214-922-8885, and you can email him at DeMarcus, DAMARCUS.Offord, OFFORD, at mail.house.gov. That's his name, DeMarcus.Offord at mail.house.gov. And he gets all of those emails. She wants to hear. If we have ideas, suggestions, or concerns, you never know when something is going to come from out of the blue that will create an opportunity for her to advance all of our objectives and help her continue to work on our behalf. Thank you all. I want to thank all the panelists for being here. And Congresswoman Johnson, do you have any final notes?
I just want to thank you, and I'm just so delighted to have had the input from these two young men, and I want them to stay in touch. We try very hard. With almost 1 million people in the district, sometimes it's difficult to get to know all of them because you're gone most of the time. If it wasn't for this pandemic, we wouldn't have had this. And so we take advantage of every opportunity we have to try to connect, because we need to connect. So don't be shy. And getting in touch, we will try our best to see if we can link up together and see if we can be of support to each other.
That's what we need.
Thank you very much.
Support each other. Thank you all for joining the Dallas County Democratic Party tonight with our conversation, a community conversation building race relations. And let's just call this a part one. Let's agree we've only hit the tip of the iceberg, and we're gonna do this again. And we want everybody who's joined us tonight to reach out to people in their community, ask them to join in so we can have more voices and more input, because this is an issue that affects all of us. What makes one of us better,
we're all in it together.
And we're all in it together. My name is Audrey Morehead, your judge of Dallas County Criminal Court number 3, and it's been my absolute honor to serve as a moderator tonight. Thank you all, and take care of each other.
Thank you, Judge Audrey. We so appreciate all the panelists, and I hope to see you all tomorrow night at 5 o'clock so you can help us greet Donald Trump, give him a special Democratic welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Peace.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Oh, look what he showed up at the end.